Nice to meet you. I'm Star. So I've been working in the game industry for many years now, and I focus primarily on marketing and business operations. So if you're interested in studios, how games are made from a business standpoint, and the game industry, then I hope you stick around to watch other videos on my channel because I'm here to help. I started streaming on Twitch back in 2015. At the time, I was working at an indie game studio. I was help running a local game dev meetup, and I was also teaching kids game development. I started streaming because I was hearing a lot of misconceptions about game development, and I wanted to share it more with the public. I was answering questions that I had already answered dozens of times, and to be honest, things haven't changed that much over the years. So that is one of my goals here on this channel, is that I want to show you the kind of honest conversations that developers have and how it feels frustrating sometimes because we feel like we're being ignored. So today I'm going to give you an example, and the reason why I'm talking about this now is because it's relevant. I don't know if it will be a few months down the road, so we're doing this today. And I usually don't talk about a specific person, but this particular conversation has been shared a lot already, so I'm just gonna give you a little bit more from my perspective. I want to show you how developers explain the realities of development to people, but how they won't listen because it doesn't line up with their perception of how games are made. Before we begin, I just want to say real quick that there is no shade here towards this person. I totally understand this mindset behind this. There's been a lot of information going around, specifically NFTs. But at the same time, I want to explain from a developer's perspective why these certain ideas are just not possible. Like, it's just not going to happen probably the way that they think it is. And I don't know where they're getting this information from. Like, who's telling them this? Like, I feel like there's some shadiness going on behind the scenes. And I feel like he's just explaining some information that someone else had told him, and he's kind of the one who's unfortunately getting a lot of the heat from this, even though he's not the one who probably thought of this itself. Okay, here we go. So here's something people aren't explaining. NFTs don't have to be JPEGs. Imagine taking your favorite skin from Valorant and using it in Fortnite and not paying extra because you own it. And then using it in Call of Duty, Minecraft, even Twitter, IG. So many possibilities, no? And it's like, no, this is not it. Okay, so let's look at some people who are much smarter than me. How did they respond? And of course, like, I follow game developers, so you're gonna see their answers first underneath. Osama, good dude, definitely should follow Osama. No. Games made by the same company don't have the same art pipelines and standards. You can't take a Mario hat and use it in Zelda. What you're describing would require so much work that there's no business case for real games to do this, only NFT cash grabs. Exactly. Like, games are not going to share their IPs with each other. Like WB, like Batman, like at Harry Potter. Is that going to split between Zelda and Pokemon? No, it's not going to happen. Game developers, game companies are very protective of their IPs and their characters. And like with Smash, I think it's kind of spoiled people because Smash does have different characters in it from different genres. Yeah, but like that's not going to happen realistically for a like industry-wide swapping of assets. It's not possible. And I'll explain more. I'm not going to explain more. I'm going to have these developers tell you. Because I'm not technical, but they are. They've actually done this. So Miranda says, yeah, it's really hard to adapt to different pipelines. I've been in many meetings about this kind of stuff. I think nowadays Call of Duty could pull it off, but that would be so annoying. I don't know about that, but I think even in Call of Duty, like having a Final Fantasy Call of Duty sounds like cool, sounds like a good idea, but you know, they're very protective of their IPs, their intellectual properties. They're probably not going to share it, and it's definitely not going to be owned by some one person. It's this just doesn't make any sense as a business model. It's also worth noting that NFTs don't seem to provide any functionality unless added backed expense is a new function. Yes, we can build marketplaces, we can build uniquely ID'd items, people can sell them. We don't because those ideas make games worse. Yes, it makes it, if this was a possible thing, don't you think developers would already do this? Like, do you think like an NFT person like they came up with this brilliant ideas that developers have never thought of. Of course we've thought about this. We know about this. We would love to swap things, but we're not going to do it to give NFT people a bunch of money. Like, those companies are going to keep it for themselves, right? I could see companies using the same game engines try and do it. I doubt it, but it could be done. Okay, so he's a little skeptical. What is Osama's response? It is not possible. There's no financial incentive to do this, especially for any items that affect gameplay. Yeah, it's so much work, and it removes the ability for companies to monetize these items themselves. Why would the big companies bother? So this is Chris, who works at Toge Productions, who has like published a lot of really great games. Should definitely check out Toge. So Chris says, "Hi Mike, your music has made a huge impact in my life and I respect you a lot." See, game developers understand that this stuff is new to a lot of people and they want to show like their best foot forward. Like, they want to include people into this conversation. They want to be listened to, and yeah, they're giving their time to explain these things. However, as a game developer, I have to tell you that the NFT doesn't magically create interoperability.
Interoperability.
Am I saying this right? Sorry. Imagine taking your favorite rap lyrics and use it in other songs. Most of the time, it doesn't work. Exactly. Different genres of music, mixing them together can be great, cannot be great. It doesn't make sense though with NFTs, doesn't make sense in games. Like, for example, if I'm using a big sword in like one game and then another game uses guns, who is going to animate all those things? Rigging animation, shaders, like putting that together, mechanics, hitboxes, colliders, physics. There's just a lot. Skins are assets that need to be created and incorporated by human labor on live servers, and this is before even thinking about the legal side of things. NFT art are currently nothing but make-believe with no real legal protection. It may evolve beyond that, but that isn't now. Exactly. It's just, yes, NFT can be something, but right now it's just not stable. And the people that are holding all the cards, they're trying to sell you this fantasy of what it is, and it's just not possible. At least in the game, I can only talk about games, okay? I can't talk about music or other spaces. I can only talk about games. But this person, Mike, happened to mention games, so this is why a lot of developers are piping up and saying, no. But I'm going to go ahead and go into other tweets that are not directly replying to Mike, but trying to give a more structured answer, a more technical answer. Once again, you cannot take a skin from one game and drop it into another and expect good results. Even if they were made in the same engine, the scales won't match, the rigs won't match, the LODs won't match, level of detail, sorry, you can Google it. The hitboxes won't match, the shader budgets won't match, and people who don't do game dev are just like, what are hitboxes and shaders and rigs? Like, what exact? Oh, my hair. They're like, what exactly is that? Yeah. And most of all, to hit decent frame rates, we pre-compute anything that can shadows cast by static lights, that kind of thing. That's only possible because we have all the game's assets on hand when we press build. Tricks like this are why games look as good as they do today. Naturally, if you're importing community assets, many of those tricks won't be available to you. Yeah, like if you ever been a developer who's like bought something off like the Unity asset store, Unreal assets, or anything off the internet and incorporate it into your game, you have to spruce it up a bit. Like you can't just take it straight from one thing to another usually. You have to like work with it. That's why a lot of devs like do prefer to build their own assets and not just make an entire game from somebody else's assets. Or if they do make a game from somebody else's assets, it's like one person who's made a lot of different kinds of assets because it makes it easier for the pipeline. If you're taking a bunch of different things from a bunch of different places, it's just so much harder. And if the thing works at all, which is dicey, you'll still be left with a harsh choice between unbelievably slow development or poor fidelity, performance, and stability. At this point, someone says, well, what about source engine sprays? And the answer is, aside from being an easily abused moderation nightmare, they are tiny and don't touch any gameplay systems, which doesn't hold for more complex assets like skins. Anyway, builds, they take a long time. They already a limiting factor for any game team's development speed, and that is just within the in-house assets of where the build fails. You can DM the artist on Slack and debug the program with them right away. You also want the assets on hand when you press build so you can test the game. Make sure items don't cause crashes and check yourself for legal compliance. Yes, solving these problems would require a much higher level of gameplay standardization across games, and bluntly, that's a super hard sell. Dev teams are very focused on making their game the best it can be, and standardization sits on the way of that goal. Like, I'm telling you, even people's titles in game studios vary a lot. I can apply to a lot of different companies, and under one title I can do many different kinds of jobs. Like, there is not a lot of standardization as you would think there is in game development between studios. When you're going between even like AAA studios like Bethesda, Riot, Sony Santa Monica, like a lot of these kind of studios, the structure is very different, how they do things, the tools that they use, all of them is very different. And then indie is just like, it's the Wild West. Yeah, so, all right, so that is a more technical answer. Sorry if that is weird for you. I will give a link to this if you want to read this yourself. I highly recommend it. I think Jules does a great job. Here's a story for you. I was involved in a cross promotion to bring an asset from one AAA game into another AAA game. It took months of work to get the asset into our engine and have it working as intended. So not only this, but the asset behaved differently, and its original game behavior did not make sense for how our game behaved. So designers had to make changes on our side to make sure the item was competitive with other items in the game. Yes, things don't just magically fit together. Like, a lot of times you put things, like I just explained earlier. Never mind. We shipped bespoke content with items, some of which were content we shipped with every similar item. This content usually equated to roughly a day's worth of work just for me to create the UI art assets. There was extra work that went along aside it too. Overall, it was maybe half a year from receiving the 3D model from the original developer to getting it into our game, playable, and shipped with everything in an asset of this type was meant to have, and that was with a lot of collaboration with the original developer. Why on earth is any game studio going to spend 6 months on an asset that they have no tangible benefit from? This cross-promotion brought us new players and spun up interest for our game and a hotly anticipated release. An FG item do none of that. NFT items. NFT. Oh my god, that's amazing. And that 6 months worth of work in this scenario is for an asset owned by one person, and not even an asset every player can obtain. That's an obscene level of work for absolutely no benefit. Guys like Linkin Park Mike over here, what if you could without thinking about how you would that? And what they're thinking, it doesn't even begin to scrape the surface of how video games are actually made, and they refuse to listen when they're told how unfeasible it is. When professional game developers, people who understand the insane level of overwork required to ship the average video game, are telling you something is obscenely overscoped to be even possible, maybe listen. So this is my friend Rami, and he says the idea of interoperability. God, I'm pronouncing this wrong. Oh well. In games is so funny when you realize we can barely manage to ship the stuff we are making ourselves and have full control over, let alone the idea that the industry that spent decades arguing over what direction the y-axis is can agree on anything. Pretty much summarizes everything that we'd seen before. Yeah. It's just not feasible. We do not have that many industry standards. We just don't. Like, and we don't need to. It's very expensive. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make us more money. And I mean, when I say us, I mean like the bigger industry, all the people who make the actual decisions in this industry. We can't even agree what indie games are. What are indie games? Please someone explain to me. I work on indie games and I don't know the definition. I'm Starlight Skies. I hope that you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next video.